Wow, this is the furthest we've ever been apart during one of these podcasts.
Yes. You see, something happened yesterday. Joe, would you like to share?
I woke up in the morning and I had a really bad headache and I decided to go for a walk. And on that walk, I had a really bad cough. And then when I came back home, I decided that I did have COVID and there was no denying it. And I took a test and surely enough, within 60 seconds, the second line appeared showing that I was COVID positive. And somehow, miraculously, for the second time that has happened, Allison, so far, knock on wood, she has not contracted COVID.
And we thought, what a great idea to record an episode of our podcast.
While I'm COVID positive.
But we're sitting far away. I'm wearing my mask, which, might affect the sound quality.
It actually sounds fine.
I think it's fine. It's probably a pretty thin mask.
I am maskless, sitting on the couch. Allison sitting at the kitchen table, a little over 6 feet away. I'm not even looking in her direction.
It's true.
I'm staring at a wall.
But I'm looking at you.
I'm like the priest during Vatican I, where they don't acknowledge the parishioners.
Oh my gosh, that was a deep cut. I didn't know that was a... Were they doing it behind a screen?
I think he would just stare at a wall.
Oh.
Like his back.
Is that because it's so, like, during the consecration?
I think during the entire mass, it's like he was like facing the wall where like whatever representation of God was. It's like he's facing God the entire time.
Okay, well, I'll have to...
I think.
Check in with my Nana about that. And
with your Nana?
She'll probably remember. She's been going to church.
Yeah. Vatican II was like, happened in the 70s, right? So a little before our time.
I think that's probably true.
But we're not here to talk about Jesus. Well, sometimes we are.
He'll come up from time to time.
Yeah. We are here on, what are we calling this?
Is it not going to be... Okay, well, maybe we can ask our audience. We went back and forth between the original name of this podcast, which was QCC, or Queer Cinema Catchup, because Joe and I have an origin story. We are childhood friends and neighbors who grew up around the corner from one another, built I'm sorry, that was an incorrect word to use. We created short films with Joe's dad's camcorder in the backyard. And then I moved away tragically at the age of 14 to the other side of the country. Cut to 15 years later, somehow we both found our way to LA, having never given up on our movie-making dreams. And we both turned out to be queer. We didn't know it back then. So we thought, what a better way than to chat about movies
than on a podcast.
But a few months ago, we thought, what if instead it was called something different? Blank, is it queer? And so it wasn't going to be just movies, so now we're kind of circling back around to that idea. So it'd be like blank, movie title, is it queer? Which I kind of do like.
I do. What if we just see how successful Queer Cinema Catchup is?
Yeah.
And if that has any of a connection with people, then we can do a spinoff. Is it queer?
Love it.
Because I feel like you and I watch a lot of movies.
We do.
And recently we've been watching a lot of queer-related movies. And so for this first episode, we wanted to talk about the 2023 Oscar-nominated movie, Nyad.
Everybody's gotta live.
Diana Nyad, world champion marathon swimmer.
The swim I want to do is 60 hours. That's Cuba to Florida.
Absolutely not. No. That's insane, Diana. You tried that when you were 28, and you did not make it when you're 28. You're 60.
I don't believe in imposed limitations.
Yeah, Nyad. For a second, I was about to question you and be like, is it really a 2023 movie? Is it? Did it come out in 2024?
No, it came out in 2023.
Good to know.
That changes everything.
So to back up a little bit, this is what I knew about Nyad before I saw it. I knew it had Jodie Foster and Annette Bening. I knew they were gay in it. And I assumed they were a couple. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll watch that. But then I heard from our friends who are big movie buffs that it wasn't very good. It was kind of cheesy. And so I was like, you know what? I don't really want to watch that. And so then one day I decided to put it on while Joe was away. This actually happened 2 days ago. And loved it.
Yeah. And then in my COVID sickness, I watched it separately, and I too,
as I urged you to,
loved it. I was so shocked because I heard it was kind of a mediocre, boring bio movie, so I just really didn't have an interest. And then I watched it, and I was very gripped the whole time. And it wasn't doing like any crazy cinematic things, but I thought it really held my attention. And Jodie Foster and Annette Bening and all the supporting actors really did a good job in like delivering the performance, and I really felt like I was there.
Yeah, I feel like it was just a very kind of almost old-fashioned feel-good film. Maybe old-fashioned's not the right word, but like just a cozy watch
Yeah.
where I could feel good. Although later on I found out that perhaps the feel-good story I saw wasn't entirely true. We could talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes I wonder, like, are there certain movies that like work for me because I'm me? And that's why I like it. I mean, I guess that's true for all. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say here? I feel like it doesn't.
Well, like, why don't people feel like it should be Oscar nominated, I guess is the first question.
Let's go to Rotten Tomatoes and see what they say. It's very technical. You know, maybe this is just the people that we hang out with are cynical because it has an 86% tomato meter and then an 89% audience score. That's pretty damn good.
That's good. Our two friends that are really big movie buffs were negative about it. And then I listened to a podcast called The Big Picture Podcast. They said Jodie Foster was good. And that was about it, which after watching it, I don't really agree with. I was like impressed by all the elements.
I was. And I also was just very inspired by the story.
Yeah. Allison just got a swimming membership. So we both have watched this movie within the last 48 hours. And I'm thinking that we'll just kind of like quickly, with lots of spoilers, so spoiler alert, just go through our own memory of like how the movie transpires and maybe give some commentary on it. And then from there, we can talk about like, ended on like our reactions to the movies or whatever comes to mind while we're kind of going through the synopsis.
Cool.
It might be fun just to go from memory. And even if we get some facts wrong, we can kind of like discuss it. But the movie starts out, how does the movie start out?
They're walking back from Annette Bening and Jodie Foster. Wait, you know what? First things first. As much as I would love to call them Annette and Jodie this entire time, it feels a little wrong.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
Annette Bening plays Diana Nyad, a marathon swimmer, and Jodie Foster plays Bonnie Stoll, who I believe may have been some sort of racquetball champion / coach. That was hinted at in the film, but I don't know much about her outside of the world of the film. And so it begins with them like walking out of a pet store because they both have dogs. They love their dogs.
Yes.
And they're chatting, and Diana's about to turn 60, and she, doesn't want that to limit her. And that's kind of the theme of the beginning. Bonnie's thrown her a surprise birthday party, which is what Diana secretly wanted, even though she pretended she didn't want a birthday party. And during the party, it becomes clear that Diana is very self-centered, talking about herself a lot and her past accomplishments and her failure, crucially, to complete a swim between Cuba and Florida when she was 28 years old. And at the height of her career, she began the swim, and then I forget how long into it, they had to abandon it because of, I think the current was a problem. They had drifted off course or something like that.
And I think something interesting between going to the Petco to like the following scene is, I assumed that the two characters were in like a romantic relationship with each other. Diana comes over to Bonnie's house, and I was like, what? They're not living together? And then I quickly realized when Bonnie tries to set Diana up with a woman at the party, I was like, oh, they aren't together. And then it's like revealed through dialogue. Diana says like, oh, we dated a long time ago, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I actually I think I heard that they weren't together before I saw the movie, and that kind of made me like a little bit less interested because I was kind of confused. I was like, wait, I thought this was like a really queer movie. So are they not queer? But then I realized, as we already said.
And then is it adherently queer to feeling more like they have an obligation to do like really incredible feats of human strength, whether it's like through like their body or through like acting or through recognition?
What a great question, because there's actually a theory about this. I think we've talked about this before.
Have we?
I feel like I talked to you about this, the good boy, good girl theory.
Yeah, what is that theory?
Okay, so this comes from, I'm looking at the University of Michigan, a paper published by Benjamin Blankenship and Abigail Stewart for the Department of Psychology. The Best Little Kid in the World, Internalized Sexual Stigma and Intrinsic Contingencies of Self-Worth, Work Values, and Life Aspiration Among Men and Women, published in 2021. According to the Best Little Boy in the World hypothesis, many gay men exhibit a drive to excel in achievement-related areas of life as a way to avoid staking self-worth on domains where others' projection could negatively affect them. And that came from a 2013 paper by researchers named Pachankis and Hotzenboller. So this paper is like expanding that theory to look at both men and women. But so yeah, basically I think it's something that's been researched maybe in psychology and sociology, the idea that like if you're othered. You might strive for achievement that's going to bring you acceptance and make you appear right or good as a, counterbalance.
Yeah, just because within the very first few moments, like Bonnie has a flair to her where she just kind of like rolls with it. Like she's just very good interacting with other human beings, where like Diana just has this like intensity to her that only Bonnie seems to really understand. And later on, when we meet more of the crew, they are like determined to help her get across the field, but there's some obvious struggles that go along the way on that journey.
I think the film did a really good job of highlighting Diana's personality flaws, where she was single-minded and maybe not aware of or choosing to not be very conscious of other people's needs and wants.
Right. It was really interesting to learn like all the crew that gets hired, they don't get paid. Like she ends up needing to raise $500,000 and none of that goes to the crew that supported
At
her.
least as far as we know. I'm
And
not
there
sure
was
how
like
positive about that.
there was the person there's Bonnie, who's her coach. Then there's someone who's like navigating like the seas, like how the wind's blowing to see the currents. There's the person driving the boat. There's someone hired to like figure out like the shark attacks. That like there's a really cool scene where they it almost felt like a scene from James Bond where they've done research where they throw in this like magnetic rope and the sensor on it like prevents sharks from attacking because it messes with their, I don't know if they have I don't think they have echolocation, but there's something where like the frequency like hurts the sharks. And then later on, like one of the big villains of this movie are jellyfish, and they end up bringing a doctor who like specializes in like jellyfish research. I think box jellyfish specifically.
And she has to wear all this like special gear to keep her body safe from it because they're very venomous. And that was really interesting scientifically. Apparently, like if you, unlike like other kinds of bites or being exposed to venom, instead of it increasing her immunity to dying from that kind of venom, it does the opposite, where the more times she gets stung, the more likely she is to die. So it's really fascinating.
Yeah. So we had this party. We kind of learn more about Diana's personality, her struggles. And then within like the first couple scenes, right, she acknowledges that she wants to attempt to do this swim from.
Wait, what actually was the impetus? What would you say was the inciting incident? Because it happens.
Well, because her 60th birthday is kind of it, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I mean, later on, she says in the movie that was kind of memorable. She's like, I'm not just going to sit around and wait to die. That's what
Yeah.
everyone wants me to do.
But wait, wasn't there like something that made her, because what makes her go to the pool?
That's a good
I don't remember.
question.
There's definitely some reason why she's like, I'm going to try and swim again. And then like she's been on her own swimming to build up. I think like she gets to like 4 or 5 hours. And then she kind of invites Bonnie over to kind of con her into coaching for her.
Yeah.
And then they go to Mexico to do a little test swim. And one of my favorite parts, honestly, is when I was like, oh yeah, I'm really digging this movie, was they get into the water. I think they're going to try and do an 8-hour swim in Mexico. And that involves like Diana swimming in the water, Bonnie on a boat nearby, kind of observing and encouraging and tracking everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first time it's too cold and Diana's like, I can't do this. So the first attempt is a failure. And they get out of the water, they're like relaxing on the beach or whatever, and they have this conversation where Bonnie says to Diana, you know, like I talked to all these experts and they don't think that swim from Cuba to Florida is possible, and especially not for you at your age, like you can't do it. And that like really rankles Diana, and she's like, you know what, no, we're gonna do another test swim tomorrow. I am gonna do this. And then it turns out that Bonnie was lying to Diana because she knew that that's what would get like would enable her to be able to do this. And I just thought, wow, that was really smart, and they really know each other. I don't know. I just really appreciate that exchange.
So Allison and I watched this movie separately, but I guarantee we each had like the same emotional journey.
We're very similar.
Yeah, that moment also too. I was like, oh my. Wow, she got her. Like I just like was very like endeared, especially by Bonnie.
It made me think a lot about like what it takes to be a good coach.
Yeah.
You know, and how you need to be able to see people's potential and know how to mine that potential.
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel very inspired by coaches in general.
Because then there was another moment where someone says to Bonnie, or Bonnie's like teaching someone on how to coach Nyad, and Bonnie says, "Now you can't be too rough on Nyad because she doesn't respond well to that. But you can't coddle her. Be like condescending. She doesn't respond well to that either. So it's like you have to find this like good balance of not like chastising, but also not like being like saying yes to everything. Like you have to know when to hold your ground, which, and again, spoiler alert, I had no idea, but now I feel kind of foolish for not thinking this, but I had no idea. I know that I think it was like 1978 when Nyad first attempted to do this swim, but I had no idea that she would have to do, was it 3 more attempts to complete this swim?
I think in total was, she tried 6 times. Am I wrong about that?
Oh, wow.
Oh, wait, maybe it was 5. Wait. While I'm looking that up, I did want to ask, when that part happened where Bonnie was like saying, you can't be too harsh with her, you can't be too coddling, blah, 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 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It made me instantly reflect on like, well, what kind of what do I respond to?
Yeah.
So I want to know, what would you respond to more? Or what kind of coaching style do you think would get you a Nyad performance?
I really do not respond well when someone's like condescending to me, and that really like creates a lot of spite in me. I think if I were to choose between the two of them, even though I wouldn't like either option, I think I'd rather someone be too hard on me, I think, than be like condescending.
To clarify, you don't have to pick one or the other. It could be something else entirely.
I think someone who comes at me and feels like they're like working with me, as opposed to shutting me down or making me feel like I'm a child, I like don't respond well to those. So I guess there's a little more Nyad in me than I anticipated.
I feel like, when I was a kid, I did really well in school, and I was like a decent athlete when I was young. I was like, okay, I could be good at either of these things, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But in the sports world, I feel like once I got a little older, there was just so much tough love.
Yeah.
And not a lot of encouragement or praise. And then in the school arena, there's a lot of praise. People love to be like, wow, you got an A, that's amazing. And I think I need a lot of encouragement to do anything.
Okay.
So maybe I do like to be babied. I don't know. But the spite thing you were talking about, I relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it was 5 attempts. She made it on her 5th attempt. One thing the movie does not really go into, they take Diana's story at face value, that she completed this swim in 2013 and was the first person, I think, to do it without the use of a shark cage, because people have done it, which the movie also didn't really indicate, that people had done it before with the shark cage.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the shark cage, for those who didn't watch the movie, is to protect you from sharks.
Not trap you in with sharks.
Yes, very different. But after the movie, I Googled Diana Nyad, and I found out that the swim, hasn't been, I guess, certified is the term that they use. And there's like a new organization that has certain rules in place for what counts as a certified long distance swim. And that organization was not around when she completed the swim. But even by the standards of back then, it wasn't certified. And that's because they didn't keep very good records of like one night of the swim or something like that. So there's a lot of controversy around whether or not she actually completed the swim as she was supposed to, which would mean that she was in the water the whole time. Like she could like float on her back, but she couldn't stop, like couldn't hold on to the boat. No one could touch her for as long as it took to get from Cuba to Florida. And so there is doubt as to whether that really happened. Personally, that doesn't take away from the incredible feat, because I just think after watching the movie and seeing, like, even if you were swimming for 40 plus hours and you held onto a boat for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
There's no way most people could do that. So I still find it impressive.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to note, and I also think it's important to note that she may have also been exaggerated past swimming feats. And so they're, within the swimming community, like her legacy isn't as seen as positively, or it's got questions around it. So, make of that what you will.
So the first time she failed in around 1978, but she didn't attempt again until 2010, 2011, 2012.
Yeah, which wasn't that, sorry, I'm like getting so distracted. Wasn't that crazy? Like this was all happening while we were younger, and I had like truly no idea.
No, I had no idea this was going on either. So there were 5 total attempts.
Yes.
The second time she failed because she had an allergic reaction to the medication.
Yeah, her shoulder was hurting.
And she gets Tylenol, and it had something that...
Or was it Tylenol? Whatever it was, she was allergic to.
And then the third time...
I think it was a jellyfish.
Jellyfish.
The box jellyfish.
The fourth time...
The storm.
Oh,
They tried to do it during like very bad weather, and then they pulled her out.
And then she completed it on the 5th time.
When she was 64.
Wow.
And she'd started, as we mentioned, during her 60th birthday. That's when this whole thing kicked off.
Which, as we all grow older, 4 years goes by in a half second.
Precisely.
I think what was really interesting about the movie, interspersed with, and I think it's like typical with biopic movies, is you have like the event that the movie's about, but then you also will do like flashbacks to show what their past or their childhood was like. And they really contain all the flashbacks because Nyad had been swimming since she was a child. They show like flashbacks of like how she first got into swimming, and then like her relationship with the water, and then slowly through the flashbacks, her relationship with her coach that quickly turns sour.
Yeah, I mean, the relationship with the coach, I did see some complaints on like Reddit about they thought this was inelegantly handled. I didn't feel that way, but when she was an adult, she came forward and said that her childhood swimming coach had sexually abused her.
Mm-hmm. Even before she attempted doing her swims again, right? Because she talks to Bonnie in a scene is like, we all, like a bunch of us came forward.
Yeah.
And said something. And that conversation was sparked when he died.
Yeah, exactly. And Bonnie hadn't called. There's a rift later on in the movie between Bonnie and Diana because Diana is so insistent on completing this goal, and Bonnie sacrificed so much to be there and be her coach. Has to like remortgage her house, like put her life on pause, and is trying to be like, I can't do this again, and you need to like hear me. And so they get into this big fight.
So many movies do this where there's like a rift between a friendship.
This is a big theme for Joe.
And I get so annoyed because usually it isn't handled realistically, or it just feels like they're trying to make like stakes without like it coming naturally. But I think in this moment, they just did a really good job on having you understand how difficult this is for Bonnie and the team, that it feels really natural. And especially how intense Diana is. It all like happens very natural for Bonnie to be like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, because Diana is basically saying to her, like, you need to be okay with me dying. Because I'm not going to give up until I either die or complete this. And Bonnie is her like best friend. Bonnie's like, I don't want you to die. But then by the end, very movingly, she says, I don't want you to die, but if this is what's going to happen, I want to be there with you.
Yeah, I want to be the last person that you see.
And one thing I thought was very effective about the sort of arc for Bonnie was in the very beginning of the movie. Maybe it was actually that is what got Diana back in the pool. She is talking about how her mom, who had passed away, Diana's mom, she had like boxed up all her stuff from the nursing home, and she found like a book of poems by Mary Oliver, who's a very famous poet, also a queer woman. I'm not sure how she identifies, but I think she had a long-term female partner, and her poetry is very famous. And so she like reads this like very famous line that I think most people have heard, which is like, what are you going to do with your one precious, wild, and crazy life, or something like that? She's like, and Bonnie's like, yeah, I mean, Mary Oliver. She's like, you know who this person is? And she's like, yeah, she's like really famous. And then she was saying, Diana was saying how like, oh, my mom, she dog-eared this page. She didn't do anything with her life. What was she thinking about? Did she leave this as a message for me? And then she like says, nope, I looked in the front of the book and it was actually the neighbor's book. So it means nothing, or something like that. But then hilariously, or very movingly, Bonnie has said, no, I'm done. I'm going back to California. Good luck on your journey to complete this impossible swim. And she's in the car, and an NPR segment about Mary Oliver comes on the radio, and Bonnie's like, shit, I have to.
Yeah, they read that same line from the poem.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
And also to kind of like flesh out their characters even more, like Diana's like, I don't understand poetry. Like, why don't they just get to the point?
Yeah, like, why don't they just say what they mean?
Yeah.
So I really liked that. But yeah, to go back to the abuse stuff. I mean, I felt like I'm glad it was in there, because if you didn't, Diana's not a very likable character in some respects. I mean, the performance is great, and her grit is incredible, but she is probably, at least as portrayed, seems pretty narcissistic and difficult to be around. And so just having the backstory of her coach and his abuse, but also like she had a stepfather who, from the time she was very little, was like having her pull out the dictionary and look up their last name, Nyad, and it means like water nymph, and telling her it was her destiny to be great in the water. It kind of helped me understand her character. And there was this like really beautiful part. It was when she said something like, I'm supposed to be great. It almost seemed like, I wish I could remember the line, but it was like,
when she says getting stung by jellyfish is so beneath me, and then she tries to check her pudding in the garbage can and misses.
No, it was like this part where she tied like her performance in the water like I'm supposed to be good at this, and that's why I can't remember, but
Something about like destiny, you mean?
it just made me like think about like psychologically how, yeah, it goes back to the best boy idea. Like there's this shameful element to my past or this like horrible something. So I have to be good. I feel like it was very beautifully and subtly put, but I don't remember, unfortunately.
Well, this movie was full of beautiful moments, and I really enjoyed it, and I really do recommend it to people. And
Yeah,
I'm
I'd say watch.
surprised, I guess, in our friend group, it doesn't seem to be so popular, but it seems to be more popular amongst other people, at least on Rotten Tomatoes and the Academy, who nominated both actors Best Supporting and Best Actress.
Which reminds me, I saw something very interesting in the news, which was that Jodie Foster is nominated and so is Coleman Domingo for, I guess, The Color Purple, which is also a great movie and a queer movie as well. It said that this was the first time in history that 2 queer actors have been nominated for playing queer roles,
Oh, wow.
which I thought was awesome. But then I also got confused because I see why. It's because he's not nominated for The Color Purple. He's nominated for another movie about a civil rights activist, Bayard Rustin, in the film Rustin, which I have to admit is a complete blind spot for me, and I feel like I should rectify that. And 1, learn about Bayard Rustin, and 2, see the movie. But that's crazy that that's the first time 2 queer actors have been nominated for playing queer roles.
Yeah, interesting. Wow. Movie history. We have Lily Gladstone as the first U.S. Native American to be nominated.
I was going to correct you if you had said otherwise, but that is excellent. Yes, you're right.
Because prior to that, someone from
Roma was nominated.
Oh, and then also a Canadian native was nominated for Running with Wolves or whatever that's called.
Dances with
Dances
Wolves?
with Wolves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, even to this day, there's still, and this is really interesting too. Okay, I don't know how comfortable you are talking about this, but I saw someone post on
Is this like when you wanted me to do an episode about
Instagram.
porn?
Someone posted on Instagram, and I wish I could pull it up, but it's about the movie Barbie. People are getting so upset that Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie aren't nominated in their respective roles, and yet people are taking no action in actually helping with rights in this country for women itself. Like people get more upset about the Academy nominations than actual like civil rights.
I know what the source was.
Human rights.
I know what the source was.
You do?
This was your sister, Molly Murphy,
Yes,
that
it
posted
was.
this. And I did see it, and I agreed. But at the same time, I think just that this is more digestible, right? Like people's lives are complicated and difficult.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the time or space to go be activists, and also think it was a lot of people feel very emotionally connected to Barbie, and so it's like if somebody on the street tells me that they hate Taylor Swift, I feel very activated.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on here. People feel very activated by
So
it.
then, is it enough for movies to be contributing and showing queer spaces, or do people need to be taking more action outside of that?
I mean, yeah, we need to take more action outside of that, I think. But I read something really interesting, and I wish I had a source for this too, how like to actually create societal change has lessened in the last century. Well, I don't know if that's correct. Okay, we just have like corporations control so much. We just have very little ability to make an impact, and how film and TV and pop culture is one of the last places where we feel like we have a voice. It's like almost like we've been like forced to. Do you hear what I'm saying here?
I do, yeah.
It's like they let us have our little fights about pop culture, but we can't actually make much change in the real world because of the systemic barriers in place.
That's awful and terrible to hear, but I do think just like in terms of I'm just like so uneducated in this area, but just like what I see with like corporations, and to tie it back into like the film industry, to see like Disney buying Fox and like everything's like merging together, it just like is really scary to me that like we're like unifying everything. Like there's more weight within one thing. And so I wonder if like that same thing is happening in politics, where it's like you kind of have to be put into like one category or the other, that there's like not really like opportunities for like the nuances in people's differing opinions, if that makes any sense.
It does. Just a disclaimer, we know a lot about movies, but we don't really know a lot about anything else.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to send in any corrections, that's
Please
totally
do.
fine. But please, we're not claiming to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because I think you and I just have a lot of like conversations where we do feel helpless in certain areas, and it's I don't know, it's like it's frustrating where both of us are like chasing our dreams, but then it's like, how do we even achieve that, let alone all the
Security.
other security that we need to like attain?
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I mean, I know like now we're in a different economy than even when we both went to graduate school for film.
Mm-hmm.
Back then I was always kind of like, oh, I'm not really worried about like I kind of rejected a big payday kind of lifestyle. I was like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And I never really worried about it. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, it's gonna be fine. Even if I don't achieve my dreams, I don't care. I want to try. And then once I came out here to LA and, you know, inflation got really bad.
Mm-hmm.
We had dual strikes and just like the cost of living in LA, I was like, no, I do kind of care about finding more security and how you balance that with like pursuing your dreams.
Yeah. Because the pleasures of life, like having a really nice like dinner or like grabbing drinks with people, like that all adds up really fast. And so it's like, how do you attain like a social life while you're also trying to chase your dreams and all that combination? It's like, it's really hard. So it'd be nice, you know, to have a steady income. I don't know how we got on this topic. Basically, we're saying if we were the crew for Nyad, we'd be really frustrated not getting paid.
I basically am distinguishing between myself and Diana and Nyad. Diana was like, her goal is all that mattered to her, or her dream is all that mattered to her. And I think I've come to a place where I now know that my dream is not all that matters to me in terms of constructing like a good, full life where hopefully I make, if not the world better, like people who interact with me, hopefully like they have positive experiences and I'm not making anyone's life worse or whatever. And maybe I get to achieve my dream too, but maybe not. It's kind of where I'm at.
I love how you tied that sentiment into this podcast because I didn't know how we were going to reconnect it.
I'm really good at synthesizing as a writer.
Yeah. But you're also a very strong writer, so you will achieve your dream.
I think, you know, all things are possible. And that's okay. You know, just tie back to the movie. My favorite part, I was riding high. Joe was coming back from a movie that he had seen on his own, and he opened the door right after Diana Nyad climbs out of the water after 40 plus hours in the ocean. She makes it to land. Everyone's on the beach cheering her on. She says, I have just 3 things to say. 1, never ever give up. 2, you're never too old to chase your dreams. 3, this may seem like a solitary sport, but it takes a team. And I wholeheartedly agree with all 3 of those points. I don't care if she lied about the swim. I mean, that is a beautiful message. So yeah, Joe walked in right after I watched that. I said, you have to watch this movie.
And it was a great call because it's a great movie. And yeah, really happy that I saw it. And I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up this first episode.
Never give up, folks.
Do you want to do your thing about like Nyad, is it queer or not?
Yeah. So, okay, one thing idea we have for this podcast is that at the end of each sort of discussion, we'll kind of say, hey, is this movie a piece of queer cinema? Now, for something like Nyad, where like the 2 leads are queer, you know, the answer probably is like yes, but other times might be a little bit more ambiguous. But I actually think this movie is especially queer because Jodie Foster and Annette Bening are not in a relationship like I thought when I began the movie. No, they're best friends and have been since their youthful days, which they kept referencing as being around 30, which I quite loved as a 32-year-old. And they were like, oh, we used to date. We don't do that anymore. And that seems very authentic, staying friends with an ex through the years and becoming even closer. But then I think what makes it even just very queer to me is like there's this moment in the film, Annette Bening is about to reach Cuba after 5 attempts of swimming across the ocean, and she's kind of failing to swim with strong technique. She's not really going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And Jodie Foster dives into the water to help her and encourage her, and it's very moving. She really sees her. She really believes in her. She expresses that to her. She encourages her. And then Annette Bening's character says, you know, that she loves her. And I felt like that expression of love, I mean, it was just really pure and beautiful. And I'm not saying that it has to be queer, but it's not like our typical idea of what love is. So therefore, it is. Yeah,
it's interesting because so much of queerness, like it already like opens up an invitation to talk about like sexuality. And then so like sexuality, people tie it into like sex. So then it's like to have a queer movie, it's like there's almost this expectation of like, oh, there's got to be a sex scene or there's like a moment, like
totally
all the tropes of like what a queer movie is. Like you have like your coming out story or the first time you have sex with with the same sex partner, like all these different elements. So it was really like refreshing that in Nyad, it's like the history of these 2 characters. Like we already felt their presence so early on and they're kind of like beyond that level. Like there's a true like friendship between them, which I think was really powerful and great to see on the screen. And so maybe that's why that's kind of like adds into your like, is it queer, is something that I think you and I both appreciated watching this movie. Is like it felt like elevated in that arena of talking about sexuality.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think like yes, it is. If you say something is gay or queer, it does bring sexuality and sex to the top of one's mind. You know, for example, I think like the movie Rocket Man was the first time in American cinema, like mainstream cinema, where there was like a male sex scene on like a scene, something like that. I'll have to look it up later. Maybe we could do a fact check or something like that.
Wait, elaborate on that.
Rocket Man, the sex scene in that movie was one of the first times. Hang on, let me just look it up. All right. In fact, there appears to be an article about this in the Mary Sue. Is Rocket Man really the first time sex between two men has been shown in a major studio film? So that's probably what I was trying to say, that this is the first time a studio film featured a sex scene between two men. Apparently, The Hollywood Reporter stated that in an article at some point in time when this movie came out.
Is Brokeback Mountain not a studio film?
That's exactly what I was about to say. There have been other, quoting from the Mary Sue article by Kate Gardner in May of 2019, she says,
Brokeback might be like Searchlight, which is like a smaller.
Yes, it says, there have been other major Academy Award nominated releases like Brokeback Mountain and Call Me By Your Name that depict sex between two men, but both films were released by smaller studios, while Rocket Man is released from mega studio Paramount. And then it said, in the 1980s, United Artists had films featuring gay couples, but nothing quite as prolific as Rocket Man. I don't really understand what the word prolific means in context there, though.
Yeah.
That doesn't really make sense. I guess the idea that it was aimed at a very broad audience, which, you know, speaks to Elton John's popularity and cultural importance. But to go back to that idea, like there's like a balance, right? Like we need those scenes to be normalized and seen in cinema too. But at the same time, like to tie queer identity only to sex is very limiting. And people are so much more than just their sexuality. And it's not just about like attraction, it's about the heart too, which tied to many things, not just sex. So that's why I really liked that piece of Nyad.
Is there like a ranking in, is it like your question of is it queer? Like,
I mean, this is our first one. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a queer movie.
Yeah.
First of all, Jodie Foster's in it, and that she makes anything to me a queer piece of cinema, even if she's playing a straight person. Like,
well, that was a dig at True Detective season 4.
Yeah, like a True Detective.
And that is Queer Cinema Catchup. Please subscribe.
And reach out if you have any questions or thoughts.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Until next week.
Bye.
Bye.